During the wedding ceremony, the guests laughed as the millionaire married a waitress and mother of 3. However, years later, everyone was stunned by what she was capable of doing. The September sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of the Whitmore Tech headquarters in downtown San Francisco. Andrew Whitmore, 35, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, his Tom Ford suit perfectly tailored to his athletic frame. Below him, the city sprawled out in a tapestry of wealth and innovation, from the gleaming spires of the financial district to the fog-kissed Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. His fingers drummed against the crystal tumbler of 25-year-old Macallan as he watched his Aston Martin being valeted into the private underground garage. The $300,000 car was just another symbol of the success he'd built upon his family's legacy, a legacy that his sister Victoria reminded him daily he was now threatening. "Mr. Whitmore," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Chen from Goldman Sachs is here for your 2 p.m. Before he could respond, the heavy mahogany door swung open, and Victoria Whitmore Rhodes strode in, her Louboutins clicking against the floor. Her Hermes Birkin bag, a rare crocodile edition worth more than most cars, swung from her arm as she dismissed the assistant with a wave. "We need to talk about this nonsense with the waitress," Victoria declared, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the back of a leather chair. "The board meeting is in 2 weeks and rumors are already circulating." Andrew turned, his jaw tightening. "Her name is Haley, and she's more than just a waitress. She manages the entire restaurant now." "Oh, forgive me," Victoria's voice dripped with sarcasm. "The restaurant manager who serves coffee to tech bros in the Marina District. Much better. That'll really impress our shareholders." The tension in the room could be cut with a knife. Andrew set down his glass with deliberate calm. "I'm not having this conversation again, Victoria. I love her." "Love?" Victoria laughed, the sound as sharp as broken glass. "You're the CEO of a $50 billion tech company. Love is a luxury you can't afford right now, especially not with someone who has 3 kids from a previous marriage and a credit score that probably matches her shoe size." The sunlight caught the edge of a photo frame on Andrew's desk, a candid shot of him with Haley and her children at Baker Beach. Her youngest, Sophie, was building a sandcastle while Michael and Emma, the twins, were flying a kite. The joy in their faces was worth more than any merger deal he'd ever closed. "You haven't even given her a chance," Andrew said quietly. "She's brilliant, resilient, and her children are not our concern," Victoria cut in. "What is our concern is the Wang-Martinez merger. Did you know their board is already expressing reservations? They're old money, Andrew, traditional. They're not going to want to partner with a company whose CEO is playing house with—" The door opened again, and Caroline Whitmore, their mother, entered. At 65, she carried herself with the grace of old San Francisco nobility, her silver hair styled immaculately, her Chanel suit pristine. "I could hear you two arguing from the elevator," she said, closing the door behind her. "Mother," Victoria turned, "please tell him he's being ridiculous. The founder's gala is next month, and he wants to bring her as his date. Can you imagine? The press will have a field day." Caroline moved to the window, looking out at the city her late husband had helped shape through decades of tech investments. "Your father," she began slowly, "built this company from nothing. He understood the weight of reputation, of appearances." Andrew's heart sank. Of course, his mother would side with Victoria. She always did when it came to maintaining their social standing. But Caroline wasn't finished. "However," she continued, "he also taught me something else. The night before he died, do you know what he said to me?" She turned to face her children. "He said his biggest regret was letting others dictate his happiness for so many years." Victoria's face flushed. "Mother, you can't be serious." "I'm not finished," Caroline held up a hand. "I've met Haley. Last week at that little cafe she manages. I went there incognito, you could say. Wanted to see who she really was when she didn't know she was serving Caroline Whitmore." Andrew's eyes widened. This was news to him. "And?" Victoria demanded. "And I watched her handle a crisis when one of her servers dropped an entire tray of dishes. Instead of yelling or firing the poor boy, she helped him clean up. Then she comped the affected customers' meals and gave them premium reservations for the following week. She turned a disaster into customer loyalty. That's the kind of instinct you can't buy with an MBA from Stanford." The room fell silent. Andrew felt a surge of pride, but also worry. He knew what was coming next. "However," Caroline's voice took on a harder edge, "if she's going to be part of this family, There need to be changes, significant ones. The press, the board, our social circle, they'll tear her apart if she's not prepared, and those children, they'll need to understand the weight of the Whitmore name. Andrew stepped forward. I won't ask her to change who she is. No, Caroline agreed, but she'll need to adapt, learn our world, navigate our society. The question is, are you willing to guide her through that transformation? Because if you're not, if you're just rebelling against the family expectations, then Victoria is right, and you need to end this now. The weight of the decision pressed down on Andrew's shoulders. Through the windows, fog began rolling in from the bay, shrouding the city's peaks in a mysterious haze. His phone buzzed. A text from Haley. Just confirmed the venue for dinner tonight. The kids are so excited to try their first fancy restaurant. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly. I'm not ending anything, he said firmly, but I need your help, both of you. Not your judgment, your help, because Haley and her children are going to be part of this family, and I want them to succeed here. Victoria threw up her hands. You're impossible. When this blows up in your face, when our stock price plummets and the board calls for your resignation, don't come crying to me. She stormed out, leaving the scent of her Clive Christian perfume lingering in the air. Caroline watched her daughter go, then turned to her son. You understand what you're asking? Not just of her, but of yourself. This won't be easy, Andrew. The people in our circle, they can be cruel. Andrew picked up the photo from his desk, running his thumb over the happy faces captured in that moment of pure joy. I know, he said softly, but she's worth it. They're worth it. The intercom buzzed again. Mr. Whitmore, Ms. Chen is still waiting. Send her in, he replied, then looked at his mother. Will you come to dinner tonight? Meet them properly this time. Caroline hesitated, then nodded slowly. I'll have Winston bring the Bentley around at 7. She paused at the door. And Andrew, wear the Patek Philippe your father gave you. First impressions matter, even with children. As his mother left and the Goldman Sachs executive entered, Andrew felt the weight of two worlds colliding. Tonight would be the first test, the first of many. But as he glanced one more time at the photo on his desk, he knew that every battle ahead would be worth fighting. The real question was, would Haley feel the same way once she understood the true price of joining the Whitmore family? The crystal chandeliers of Gary Danko restaurant cast a warm glow over the white tablecloths as Haley Matthews adjusted her borrowed Chanel dress for the 100th time. The price tag of the dress alone could have covered 3 months of her old apartment's rent. Across the table, Caroline Whitmore studied her with the calculated precision of a jeweler appraising a questionable diamond. Tell me, Haley, Caroline's voice was silk over steel, how do you envision your role in the Whitmore family's public life? Before Haley could answer, her 13-year-old twins, Michael and Emma, returned from exploring the restaurant's art collection with Andrew. Sophie, her 7-year-old, remained glued to her iPad, headphones firmly in place, a new gift from Andrew that had caused their first real argument about spoiling the children. The Picasso in the lounge is amazing, Mum, Emma exclaimed, her eyes shining. Andrew says it's worth more than our old house. Haley saw Caroline's subtle wince at Emma's unfiltered enthusiasm. Andrew quickly intervened. Actually, I was explaining how art appreciation goes beyond monetary value. Speaking of appreciation, Caroline smoothly interrupted. Haley, you'll need to meet with Harrison Palmer tomorrow. He's our family's image consultant. Image consultant? Haley's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Yes, the Founders Gala is in 3 weeks. Every major tech mogul and venture capitalist in Silicon Valley will be there. The press will be watching, especially given the Wang-Martinez merger talks. Caroline's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Andrew reached for Haley's hand under the table. Mother, we discussed this. No pressure. It's fine. Haley straightened her shoulders. I'll meet with him. The next morning, in the sleek conference room of Palmer Consulting on the 50th floor of the Salesforce Tower, Harrison Palmer circled Haley like a hawk evaluating its prey. His Tom Ford glasses caught the morning light as he made notes on his iPad Pro. The clothes we can fix, he muttered. Brunello Cucinelli for casual wear, Oscar de la Renta for events. Your posture needs work. We'll bring in Philippe from the San Francisco Ballet for deportment lessons. The accent, that's trickier. My accent? Haley's Ohio roots suddenly felt like a cardinal sin. Darling, you sound like you should be serving apple pie at a county fair, not hosting charity galas at the Legion of Honor. Harrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. But Alessandro is brilliant with dialect coaching. He helped several tech wives transition from engineering speak to society fluency. The door opened, and James Chen entered, Victoria's husband and the head of legal for Whitmore Tech. His presence was unexpected and immediately set Haley on edge. "Harrison, give us a moment." James adjusted his Keaton suit as he sat down. Once they were alone, he placed a thick document on the table. "This is a relationship agreement, standard for families of our position." "A prenup?" Haley's voice cracked slightly. "Much more comprehensive. It outlines behavioral expectations, public appearance requirements, social media protocols, and yes, financial terms." James slid the document forward. Victoria insisted on the moral clause. "Any public behavior deemed detrimental to the Whitmore name will result in immediate termination of all benefits and support." Haley's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. "This is about my kids, isn't it? Teenagers can be unpredictable. Emma's TikTok account already has several videos about life in the rich kid world, as she calls it. That stops immediately." James's tone softened slightly. "Look, I know this seems harsh, but I'm actually trying to protect you. Victoria has hired private investigators." "She what?" Haley stood up so quickly her chair rolled backward. "Sit down, please." James waited until she complied. "They found some things. Your ex-husband's gambling debts. The time you had to take out a payday loan to cover Michael's asthma medication. The fact that Emma isn't actually your biological child. You became her legal guardian when her mother, your best friend, died." Tears burned in Haley's eyes. "Does Andrew know?" "Not yet. Victoria plans to present it at the next board meeting unless I sign this," Haley finished bitterly. "You have until the end of the week." James stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're good for Andrew. But this world, it's not just about love, it's about power, appearance, legacy. The question is, are your children worth the sacrifice of their freedom? Are you?" That evening, as Haley sat in her small office at the Marina District restaurant she managed, her phone buzzed with texts from Andrew. "Surprise waiting at home. The kids are going to love it. Harrison called, said the meeting went well. Can't wait to see you in that Oscar de la Renta we talked about for the gala." Each message felt like another bar in an increasingly ornate cage. She looked around her office, the worn but comfortable furniture, the wall of employee photos, the thank you cards from regular customers. This was real. This was earned. But was it enough? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock. Marcus Washington, her head chef and closest friend at the restaurant, stood in the doorway. His dark eyes took in her distress immediately. "Okay, spill it," he said, dropping into the chair across from her desk. "You've been staring at that inventory sheet for an hour and haven't written a thing." Haley hesitated, then told him everything: the agreement, Victoria's investigation, James's ultimatum. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker. "Girl, you know I love you, but you're playing in the deep end of the pool now," he finally said. "These people, they don't just have money, they have power, real power, the kind that can erase people like us." "Like us?" Haley questioned. "Yeah, like us. The ones who had to fight for every single thing we got." Marcus leaned forward. "Remember when you first hired me? Fresh out of prison, nobody would take a chance on an ex-con chef. But you saw something in me. You fought for me. Now it's time to fight for yourself." "But how? I can't compete with their world." "Then don't compete. Change the game." Marcus stood up. "You turned this failing restaurant into the hottest spot in the marina without their fancy connections. You raised 3 amazing kids on your own. Hell, you make my temperamental ass look good to the health inspectors. You've got skills they can't buy at Stanford." Their conversation was interrupted by another visitor, William Chang, the elderly owner of the restaurant and Haley's mentor. He shuffled in with his characteristic calm, a cup of jasmine tea in his weathered hands. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said, settling into a chair. "You know, when I first came to San Francisco, I had nothing. The elite families wouldn't even let me clean their kitchens. Now they fight for reservations at my tables." He smiled mysteriously. "Sometimes, the best revenge is success on your own terms." Haley's phone buzzed again, a message from Caroline. "Harrison booked your first deportment lesson for tomorrow. Car will pick you up at 9. The children will need etiquette training as well. I've enrolled them in Mrs. Winchester's youth refinement program." As she stared at the message, another text came through, this one from Emma. "Mom, There's a Ferrari in the driveway. Andrew says it's for you to practice driving in style for the gala. But are we still going camping next weekend like we planned? The walls of the golden cage seemed to close in tighter. William noticed her expression and set down his tea. "Let me tell you a story about the bamboo trees in my garden," he began, his voice carrying decades of wisdom. "For 4 years after planting, nothing appears above ground. People told me I was wasting my time, that nothing was growing. But beneath the surface, the roots were spreading, strengthening. In the 5th year, the bamboo grows 90 feet in 6 weeks. The question is, did it grow 90 feet in 6 weeks, or 5 years? "I don't understand," Haley admitted. "The roots," Marcus caught on, "they're like your experiences, your struggles, your real relationships. The Whitmores see the surface. They want instant growth, instant refinement. But your strength, that comes from deeper places." William nodded approvingly. "The old money families of San Francisco, they are like glass sculptures, beautiful but brittle. You, Haley, you are like my bamboo, flexible, resilient, and when the time is right, capable of remarkable growth." As if on cue, Victoria Whitmore walked into the restaurant, her entrance causing a ripple of whispers among the diners. She headed straight for Haley's office, her Hermes Kelly bag swinging with purposeful menace. Marcus and William exchanged looks. "We'll give you privacy," Marcus said, but Haley caught his arm. "No," she decided, drawing strength from their presence. "Whatever she has to say, she can say it in front of my family." Victoria's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose at the word family. She glanced dismissively at Marcus and William, before focusing on Haley. "I have the board's preliminary vote on Andrew's leadership," she announced without preamble. "They're concerned about his recent distractions. Unless something changes before the gala, they're prepared to ask for his resignation." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Haley felt the weight of the relationship agreement in her desk drawer, the keys to the new Ferrari in her pocket, the expectations crushing down on her children's futures. But she also felt the solid presence of Marcus and William, the memory of her journey, the strength of her own hard-won wisdom. The game was changing, but perhaps not in the way Victoria intended. The question was, who would make the next move and at what cost? The night of the Whitmore Tech Founders Gala arrived with all the grandeur San Francisco's elite could muster. The Palace Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with thousands of crystal lights, each one reflecting off the champagne flutes of Silicon Valley's most powerful players. Outside, a fleet of Rolls-Royces, Bentleys and Maybachs lined the street, their drivers standing at attention. Haley stood before the gilded mirror in the hotel's VIP suite, barely recognizing herself in the custom Oscar de la Renta gown. 3 weeks of intensive coaching with Harrison Palmer had transformed her posture, her speech, her mannerisms. The Ohio accent was gone, replaced by the measured tones of old money San Francisco. But as she stared at her reflection, a different transformation caught her attention, the slight hardening around her eyes, the practiced curve of her smile. "Mom?" Emma's voice came from the adjoining room. "Mrs. Winchester says my curtsy isn't deep enough for the presentation." Haley closed her eyes, remembering the camping trip they'd had to cancel, the art classes Emma had to drop for deportment lessons, the way Michael had stopped playing his beloved guitar, because Victoria said it wasn't suitable for a future Whitmore. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Caroline Whitmore entered, resplendent in vintage Dior, her family diamonds catching the light. "The Wang family has arrived early," she announced. "Mr. Wang specifically asked to meet you before the general reception. This could be crucial for the merger." She paused, noting Haley's expression. "Second thoughts?" "No," Haley replied automatically, the way she'd been trained. "Everything is perfect." Caroline's features softened unexpectedly. "You know, I wasn't always this way." She moved to stand beside Haley at the mirror. "I was a scholarship student at Berkeley when I met Andrew's father. My parents owned a small bookstore in the Mission District. The Whitmores, they weren't kind about it." Haley turned, surprised by this revelation. "How did you handle it?" "I adapted, survived, eventually thrived." Caroline's fingers traced the edge of her diamond necklace. "But I lost something in the process, something I'm only now beginning to recognize." She met Haley's eyes in the mirror. "Be careful you don't lose yourself entirely in this transformation." Before Haley could respond, Victoria burst in, her face flushed with barely controlled anger. "We have a situation," she hissed, thrusting her tablet forward. On the screen was a viral TikTok video, Emma in her new Chanel dress, doing a day-in-the-life tour of the Whitmore mansion. The video had already garnered millions of views, with comments ranging from fascination to outrage at the display of wealth. "I told you to control her social media," Victoria's voice rose. "The Wang family is incredibly private. If they see this, then they'll see a child adjusting to a new life," Haley cut in, her voice steady. "A child who's still learning just like her mother." "This isn't a game," Victoria grabbed Haley's arm. "Do you have any idea what's at stake? The merger, the company's future, Andrew's position? Let go." Haley's tone could have frozen champagne. The weeks of pressure, of transformation, of watching her children change, crystallized into something hard and sharp. Caroline stepped between them. "The Wangs are waiting. We handle this later." In the grand ballroom, Alexander Wang, the patriarch of Wang Industries, stood with his wife Grace, daughter May, and a man Haley didn't recognize. Andrew made the introductions, his hand supportive at the small of her back. "Ms. Matthews," Alexander Wang's accent was slight but precise. "I've heard much about you, though perhaps not everything." His eyes flickered to Victoria, who stood rigid nearby. "I believe in transparency, Mr. Wang," Haley replied, channeling every lesson Harrison had drilled into her. "What would you like to know?" The unknown man stepped forward, James Chen's private investigator, Haley realized with a jolt. "Perhaps we should discuss the matter privately," he suggested smoothly. But Alexander Wang raised his hand. "No need. I prefer honest conversations." He turned to Andrew. "Your sister sent us quite a detailed report about Ms. Matthews's background. Very thorough, very calculating." The atmosphere tensed. Victoria's smile turned triumphant. "Indeed," Grace Wang spoke for the first time, her voice carrying unexpected warmth. "It reminded me of when my own family opposed Alexander's choice to marry me. A simple teacher's daughter, they said, not suitable for the Wang empire." Victoria's smile faltered. "But what caught my attention," Alexander continued, "was not Ms. Matthews's past but her present. My daughter May has been secretly dining at her restaurant for months. She speaks highly of the management, the innovation, the community engagement." May Wang, wearing Givenchy and a knowing smile, stepped forward. "The night program for underprivileged culinary students. Brilliant. The partnership with local farmers? Innovative. The way you turned a failing restaurant into a profitable business while maintaining its soul. That's the kind of leadership we respect." Victoria's face had gone pale. "But the merger requirements are changing," Alexander stated firmly. "The tech world is evolving, Ms. Whitmore Rhodes. Old money, new money. These distinctions matter less than vision, integrity, and the ability to bridge worlds." He turned to Andrew. "We're not just investing in Whitmore Tech. We're investing in its future leadership, all of its leadership." The implications hung in the air like crystal chimes. Andrew's grip on Haley's waist tightened slightly. But the evening's true turning point came moments later. As servers circulated with champagne for the merger announcement, Sophie came running through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Mom! It's Michael! He's hurt!" The ballroom blur faded as Haley raced upstairs, her designer heels forgotten somewhere between floors. She found Michael in the hotel's music room, clutching his chest, his breath coming in sharp whistles. His emergency inhaler lay empty beside him. "Call 911, Haley commanded, her carefully constructed facade shattering as she held her son. Andrew was already on the phone, his voice tight with fear. "The spare inhaler," Michael gasped. "In your old office." Haley's heart stopped. The spare inhaler was at the restaurant in her old office drawer, the office she'd been too busy with coaching sessions to properly clean out. Marcus Washington's voice cut through the chaos. "I got it." He burst into the room, inhaler in hand, still wearing his chef's whites. "I came to drop off the special appetizers you requested, saw the commotion." As Michael's breathing stabilized, Haley looked around the room. Caroline stood in the doorway, her perfect composure cracked with genuine concern. Victoria hovered nearby, her face showing an unfamiliar emotion. Was it guilt? The Wang family watched from a respectful distance, their expressions thoughtful. But it was Emma's voice that broke the silence. "This is my fault," she sobbed. "If I hadn't made that stupid video, if we hadn't been so busy with all these lessons, we used to always check his inhaler." "No, Xiao Mei." Mei Wang stepped forward, using the Chinese term for little sister with surprising gentleness. "Sometimes we need a reminder of what truly matters." Alexander Wang nodded slowly. When I built my company, I thought success meant becoming someone else. It took my wife's wisdom to show me that true success means bringing your whole self, your past, your family, your values, to the table. He turned to Victoria, his expression stern. The old way of doing things, it's not sustainable. The next generation won't accept it. They demand authenticity, connection, purpose. Your brother seems to understand this. Do you? The question hung in the air like suspended crystal, catching all the light in the room. In that moment, as Hayley held Michael close, still in her couture gown but with mascara streaking her cheeks, she felt the shift, not just in the room, but in the very foundation of the world she'd been trying so hard to join. The question wasn't whether she could become who they wanted her to be. The question was whether the Whitmore family, and all it represented, was ready to become something new entirely. As if reading her thoughts, Caroline stepped forward, removing her iconic diamond necklace, the same one she'd been touching earlier while sharing her own story of transformation. Perhaps, she said quietly, it's time for all of us to remember who we were before we became who we thought we needed to be. The necklace caught the light one last time before she set it aside, its brilliance somehow less important than the genuine concern in her eyes as she knelt beside her grandson, society propriety forgotten in favor of human connection. In that moment, surrounded by the collision of worlds, Marcus in his chef's whites, the Wangs in their couture, her children in their carefully curated designer clothes, Andrew with his power tie askew, Hayley saw the path forward with sudden clarity. The turning point wasn't about choosing between worlds. It was about having the courage to create a new one entirely. Later that night, after the medical crisis had passed and the gala guests had departed, Hayley found herself in the hotel's empty kitchen with Marcus, both sitting on stainless steel counters like they used to do after closing time at the restaurant. "You know what's funny?" Marcus said, loosening his chef's collar. "All these fancy people upstairs eating my food, loving it. But if they knew an ex-con made it..." He shook his head, laughing softly. "They did know," came Mei Wang's voice from the doorway. She entered the kitchen, her Givenchy gown incongruous against the industrial backdrop. "My father always investigates everyone involved in potential partnerships. Your story, Mr. Washington, particularly impressed him." Marcus straightened, but Mei waved off his formality. "The rehabilitation program you run in the restaurant's kitchen? The Second Chance Employment Initiative? These are exactly the kind of community programs Wang Industries values." She turned to Hayley. "And you supported all this while keeping the restaurant profitable. That's the kind of leadership we need." "But I'm not part of Whitmore Tech's leadership," Hayley pointed out. "Aren't you?" Mei raised an eyebrow. "From what I've seen, you've been leading change since before you met Andrew. The question is, are you ready to do it on a larger scale?" Before Hayley could respond, Victoria appeared, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "The board members are asking questions," she said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. "About Michael, about the restaurant's programs, about everything." "Good." Hayley stood up. "Let them ask. I'm done hiding." She made her way back to the ballroom, now empty except for the cleanup crew and a few lingering executives. Andrew stood with his mother and Alexander Wang deep in conversation. As Hayley approached, she caught fragments of their discussion. "A new division focused on community investment and sustainable business practices," Andrew was saying. "Hayley's restaurant model could be scaled." "It's not just about scaling a model," Hayley interrupted, finding her voice. "It's about changing the definition of success." All eyes turned to her as she continued. "Tonight, everyone saw two worlds collide. But what if instead of trying to force one to conform to the other, we created something new? Something that values both tradition and innovation, privilege and responsibility?" Alexander Wang's eyes sparkled with interest. "Go on. The merger shouldn't just be about combining technologies or market shares. It should be about setting a new standard for corporate leadership, one that measures success not just in profit margins, but in lives changed." Victoria stepped forward, her expression complex. The board will adapt or be left behind," Caroline interrupted firmly. "The world is changing, Victoria. Either we change with it, or we become irrelevant." Andrew moved to stand beside Hayley, taking her hand. "I propose a new condition for the merger. We establish a joint foundation, headed by Hayley, focused on bridging socioeconomic gaps through education, entrepreneurship, and second-chance employment programs. Using both companies' resources and influence," Hayley added, warming to the idea. We could create opportunities for people who've been systematically excluded from the tech world's success. Like Marcus, May nodded. Like my mother was, Caroline said softly. Like I was, Haley finished. Alexander Wang exchanged a look with his wife, who smiled warmly. In China, we have a saying, Grace Wang offered. The bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists. So tonight I've seen much bending, much strength. Victoria looked around the room at the changing tide of power and perspective. For a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable underneath. I was wrong, she said quietly, the words clearly foreign to her tongue. Not just about you, Haley, but about what strength looks like. She took a deep breath. The programs at your restaurant, perhaps we could discuss them over coffee sometime. At your place, not some overpriced cafe. The offer hung in the air, fragile as spun sugar. Haley recognized it for what it was. Not just an olive branch, but an acknowledgement that both their worlds held value. I'll have Marcus make his special blend, Haley smiled. It's better than anything you'll find in Nob Hill. As the night wound down, Haley found Emma and Michael in the hotel's rooftop garden. They sat with Sophie, who had fallen asleep between them, her head resting on Michael's shoulder. I deleted the TikTok account, Emma said as Haley approached. Not because anyone made me, but because I want to share something real next time. Maybe about Uncle Marcus's cooking program, or the scholarship fund you're talking about. Michael nodded, his breathing now steady and strong. And Mum, Mrs. Winchester said I shouldn't, but I brought my guitar. Some of the wait staff said I could play in the employee lounge during breaks. Haley sat with her children, looking out over the San Francisco skyline. The fog was rolling in, soft and mysterious, blurring the lines between the city's hills and valleys, its mansions and modest homes, its past and future. Play something, she encouraged Michael, something that feels true. As her son's simple, heartfelt music floated into the night air, Haley reflected on the evening's transformations. The turning point hadn't just been about a medical emergency or a business deal. It had been about the courage to stand at the intersection of different worlds and dare to imagine something new. Below, the cleanup crew was packing away the crystal and china, the markers of old money and tradition. But up here, under the stars, with her children's authenticity and the promise of change in the air, Haley felt wealthy in ways that no designer dress or merger deal could match. The real work and the real transformation was just beginning. The San Francisco Chronicle's headline screamed across Andrew's desk, "Whitmore Tech Merger Sparks Controversy, Traditional Values versus Modern Innovation." The article detailed the previous night's events at the gala, complete with leaked photos of Michael's medical emergency and Caroline Whitmore kneeling in her vintage Dior, comfort over composure. The stock dropped 12 points this morning, James Chen reported, pacing the office. Conservative board members are calling for an emergency meeting. They're saying the Wang merger terms are too radical, too focused on social issues instead of shareholder value. Andrew loosened his tie, studying the morning fog rolling past his window. "And what do you think, James?" "I think," James paused, choosing his words carefully, "that my father came to this country with nothing but hope and a single suitcase. No venture capital, no Stanford degree, just determination and a small restaurant in Chinatown." He smiled slightly. "Sound familiar?" The office door opened, and Haley entered with Victoria close behind. The sisters-in-law had spent the morning at the restaurant, where Victoria had witnessed firsthand the impact of Marcus's rehabilitation program. "We have a proposition," Haley announced, spreading documents across Andrew's desk. "Victoria's been analyzing our community investment programs and they're actually brilliant business models," Victoria interrupted, her corporate mask cracking with genuine enthusiasm. "The employee retention rates are unprecedented. The community goodwill translates to customer loyalty. It's sustainable capitalism at its finest." Andrew raised an eyebrow at his sister's transformation. "You hate terms like sustainable capitalism." "I hate being wrong more," Victoria admitted. "But watching Marcus train his staff, seeing how they respect him, how they work to prove themselves worthy of the chance they've been given, it's more effective than any corporate team-building exercise I've ever seen." James picked up one of the documents. "You want to expand the program across all Whitmore Tech subsidiaries?" "Not just expand it," Haley said, "transform it. Each division would partner with local communities, creating pathways for unconventional talent. The Wang merger gives us international reach. Imagine the impact on a global scale. The discussion was interrupted by Caroline's arrival. She carried herself differently now, the rigid perfection of the previous weeks replaced by a more natural grace. "The Conservative Families Council called," she announced. "They're threatening to withdraw their social endorsement of the Whitmore name unless we return to traditional values." Her air quotes dripped with newfound disdain. "Good," Victoria surprised everyone by saying. "Their time is over. I've been doing some research." She pulled up a presentation on her tablet. "Millennials and Gen Z will inherit over 30 trillion in the next decade. They prioritize authentic brands, social responsibility, and genuine impact. The council's approval means nothing to them." Hayley watched her sister-in-law with growing respect. Victoria's transformation wasn't just about accepting change, she was becoming its advocate. The next challenge came from an unexpected quarter. As Hayley prepared for her first official board presentation, Emma burst into her dressing room at the mansion, tears streaming down her face. "They're calling us fake." She thrust her phone forward, showing social media comments about the family. "They say we're just pretending to care about poor people to look good, that we're using Uncle Marcus's story for publicity." Hayley sat her daughter down, remembering their simpler life just months ago. "Do you think we're fake?" Emma wiped her eyes. "No, Marcus changed my life. He taught me how to make Dad's favorite pasta, tells me stories about second chances. He's family." "Then that's what matters." Hayley squeezed her hand. "Sometimes when you're trying to change things, people will question your motives. The trick is to let your actions speak louder than their doubts." The board meeting proved to be a battlefield of its own. Old guard members sat stone-faced as Hayley presented the new initiative, their disapproval radiating across the mahogany table. "This is a technology company, not a charity," Bernard Winston, the longest-serving board member, objected. "Our responsibility is to shareholder value." "Really?" Hayley pulled up her next slide. "Because our pilot program at the restaurant has shown a 40% reduction in training costs, 60% lower turnover, and a 25% increase in customer satisfaction. Those numbers affect your precious shareholder value, Mr. Winston." Victoria stepped forward, addressing her former allies. "The world is changing. We can lead that change or become obsolete. The Wang merger isn't just about market expansion. It's about evolving our entire business model for the next generation." "And what about the Whitmore legacy?" Winston demanded. "I am the Whitmore legacy," Andrew stood, "and I say it's time for change." The vote was close, but with the Wang family's backing and Caroline's surprising political maneuvering among old society families, the initiative passed. The real work could begin. Transformation rippled through the family in unexpected ways. Michael, inspired by Marcus's story, started a music program for kids at local community centers. Sophie, the youngest, began accompanying Caroline on visits to family charitable foundations, her natural empathy breaking down barriers her grandmother's perfect manners never could. But perhaps the most profound change was in Victoria. One morning she arrived at the restaurant before dawn, dressed in workout clothes instead of her usual designer suits. "Teach me," she said to Marcus. "Not just about cooking, about building something real." Marcus eyed her suspiciously. "It's hard work, hot, messy, not exactly Valentino-friendly." "Good." Victoria rolled up her sleeves. "I'm tired of being exactly what everyone expects." Over the next weeks, she became a regular in the kitchen, learning alongside former inmates and at-risk youth. Her corporate efficiency melded with their street-smart creativity, creating something entirely new. The press caught wind of the story. Whitmore Heiress trades boardroom for kitchen. A recipe for change? The photos of Victoria, flower-streaked and laughing with her unlikely teammates, went viral for very different reasons than Emma's previous TikTok fame. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, now a regular occurrence in the restaurant's private room, Caroline made an announcement. "I'm selling the mansion," she declared, causing Andrew to choke on his wine. "It's too big, too empty, too untouchable. I found a smaller place in North Beach above a bookstore," she smiled. "It reminds me of my parents' shop." "But the Society Register," Victoria began, then caught herself laughing. "God, I can't believe I still care about that." "Speaking of care," Hayley added, "the Wang Foundation called. They want to partner on a global initiative, combining their international reach with our local program models." "That's not all they want," Andrew revealed. "They're proposing a joint leadership structure for the merged company. Shared power, diverse perspectives, They want Haley to head the Community Integration Division. The table fell silent. Months ago, such an announcement would have sparked outrage, debate about qualifications and appearances. Now, it felt right, earned through actions rather than credentials. "Will I still be able to help in the kitchen?" Sophie asked, her child's perspective cutting through the corporate complexity. "Always," Haley promised. "That's the whole point. We're not choosing between worlds anymore. We're creating something new, something that has room for both boardrooms and kitchens, mansions and bookstores, privilege and purpose." Later that night, as the fog rolled in from the bay, Haley found Marcus closing up the kitchen. Together, they sat on their familiar countertop, sharing leftover dessert. "Victoria's got potential," Marcus mused. "Never thought I'd say that. Yesterday she stood up to a supplier who was trying to overcharge us, negotiated a better deal for the whole program. People can surprise you." Haley smiled. "Sometimes they just need the chance to be more than their habits." The kitchen door swung open, and Emma peeked in. "Mom? Dad's on the phone with Mr. Wang. They want you in Singapore next week for the initiative launch. Also, Michael's concert at the community center is Thursday, and Sophie made you a card for something. She won't tell me what." Haley looked at her daughter, remembering the scared girl who once felt out of place in designer clothes. Now Emma moved between worlds with ease, equally comfortable in the kitchen with Marcus, as she was in board meetings with her father. "Tell them I'll be there," Haley said, "for all of it." As she headed home that night, driving her now familiar Ferrari through the city streets, Haley reflected on their journey. The challenges weren't over. Change never came easily, especially to institutions built on tradition. But they were facing them together, each member of their unlikely family growing in their own way. The fog parted briefly, revealing the Golden Gate Bridge illuminated against the night sky. Like the bridge itself, they were connecting different worlds, building something both beautiful and functional, something that could withstand the winds of change while helping others make the crossing. The real victory wasn't in proving their critics wrong, or even in changing the company's direction. It was in the small moments. Victoria's flower-covered laughs, Caroline's eyes lighting up at the sight of a bookstore, Michael's music touching hearts in unexpected places, Emma's growing confidence in her own voice, Sophie's simple wisdom cutting through complexity. They were learning, all of them, that true strength didn't come from maintaining perfect facades or meeting others' expectations. It came from having the courage to be authentically yourself while helping others do the same. The transformation wasn't complete. It never would be. But that perhaps was the greatest lesson of all. Growth wasn't about reaching a perfect end state. It was about embracing the journey, with all its messiness and beauty, its challenges and triumphs, its unexpected alliances and profound revelations. And in that ongoing transformation, they had found something more valuable than social status or corporate power. They had found themselves and each other in the spaces between who they were expected to be and who they truly were. The next morning brought new challenges that tested their evolving dynamics. The Conservative Families Council had organized a boycott of Whitmore Tech's products, causing a temporary dip in retail sales. Several old money clients had withdrawn their children from Mrs. Winchester's youth refinement program after learning it was now offering scholarships to underprivileged students. "Let them go," Caroline said during an emergency family meeting. "I've been thinking, Mrs. Winchester's program needs an update anyway. What if we transformed it into something more meaningful?" Victoria looked up from her laptop, where she'd been analyzing the boycott's impact. "What do you mean?" "Instead of teaching children how to fit into old society rules, what if we taught them how to create new ones?" Caroline's eyes sparkled with purpose. "Leadership skills, emotional intelligence, social responsibility, real tools for the future. Like a modern finishing school," Emma chimed in, excited. "But instead of learning which fork to use, we learn how to start community projects and manage social impact initiatives." Michael, who had been quietly strumming his guitar in the corner, spoke up. "Some of the kids from my music program, they have amazing ideas about improving their neighborhoods, but they don't know how to make them happen." "That's it," Haley exclaimed. "We combine Mrs. Winchester's connections and experience with real-world skills and community engagement. The next generation of leaders shouldn't just know how to attend galas, they should know how to make them matter." The idea quickly took shape. Mrs. Winchester, initially skeptical, became an enthusiastic supporter after spending a day at Marcus's kitchen program. Her expertise in social navigation found new purpose in teaching young leaders how to move between different worlds effectively. The program's first test came when Sophie's class was assigned to organize a fundraising event. Instead of the traditional debutante ball, the children proposed a multicultural food festival featuring recipes and stories from their diverse backgrounds. "But where will we hold it?" Mrs. Winchester fretted. "The Palace Hotel won't—" "We'll hold it in the street," Sophie declared with the confidence only a 7-year-old could muster. "Like a block party, but fancy. The whole neighborhood can come." The event became a symbol of their new approach. Food trucks staffed by Marcus's program graduates parked alongside Michelin-starred chefs. Children in designer clothes learned traditional dances from their classmates' grandparents. Old money mingled with new ideas, and something beautiful emerged from the collision. William Chang, watching the festivities from his restaurant's entrance, nodded approvingly. "Your bamboo has grown strong," he told Haley, "and now it provides shade for others to grow beneath it." The success sparked a wave of interest from unexpected quarters. Other tech companies began inquiring about their community integration models. Traditional social clubs requested partnerships with their youth leadership program. Even Bernard Winston, their fiercest board critic, was seen enjoying street tacos with his grandchildren at the festival. But perhaps the most significant transformation was happening within the family itself. One evening, as they gathered for their now regular family dinner at the restaurant, Victoria made an announcement that left everyone stunned. "I'm stepping down as VP of Corporate Strategy," she declared. The room fell silent. "I want to focus on expanding our community culinary program. Marcus needs help managing the growth and—" She smiled. "I've discovered I'm actually pretty good at coaching people who want second chances." "But your career," Andrew began, "is evolving," Victoria finished. "Just like everything else." She reached for James's hand. "Besides, we have some news. We're expecting, and I want our child to grow up seeing both sides of life, the boardroom and the kitchen, the mansion and the street, the power of privilege and the strength of purpose." The news sparked a celebration that lasted well into the night. As staff and family mingled freely, sharing stories and dreams, Haley watched the scene with a full heart. Every person in the room had changed, grown, discovered new aspects of themselves they never knew existed. Caroline had found her voice again, advocating for education reform with the same passion she once reserved for maintaining social hierarchies. Andrew had learned to lead with both strength and compassion, balancing corporate responsibilities with human connections. Emma was developing into a thoughtful young woman who used social media to amplify community voices instead of showcasing wealth. Michael's music had become a bridge between worlds, bringing together children from different backgrounds through the universal language of art. Even little Sophie, wise beyond her years, was growing into a natural mediator between old and new ways of thinking. The transformation hadn't been easy. They'd faced resistance, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But with each challenge, they'd grown stronger, more authentic, more connected to each other and their evolving vision of what family, success, and legacy could mean. As the evening wound down, Haley found herself back in the kitchen with Marcus and Victoria, the unlikely trio sharing leftover dessert on their favorite countertop. The sight of Victoria, her designer dress dusted with flour, laughing at Marcus's jokes about her early cooking disasters, was a testament to how far they'd all come. "You know what's funny?" Victoria mused, resting a hand on her barely visible pregnancy. "I spent so many years trying to protect our family's legacy. I never realized that sometimes protecting something means letting it grow into something new." Marcus nodded. "Like a recipe. You respect the basics, but you ain't afraid to add your own flavor." "Or like a family," Haley added, watching through the kitchen window as Andrew taught Michael and Emma some old-school dance moves, their shadows dancing across the restaurant's walls. "You honor its foundation while building new stories on top." The journey of growth continued, each day bringing new challenges and opportunities for transformation. But now they faced them together, stronger for their differences, richer for their authenticity, and united in their belief that the greatest legacies are built not by clinging to the past, but by bravely stepping into the future, hand in hand, hearts open to change. The morning of the Whitmore-Wang merger's final signing ceremony dawned with an ominous tension in the air. San Francisco's typical summer fog had given way to an unseasonable storm, dark clouds gathering over the city's skyline like harbingers of the drama to come. Inside the Whitmore Tech Tower's executive suite, Andrew stared at his phone in disbelief. The message from Bernard Winston was clear. Emergency board meeting called. Hostile takeover attempt in progress. Consortium of traditional investors moving to block merger and remove current leadership. How bad? Haley asked, watching her husband's face pale. They've been planning this for months. Andrew's voice was tight. Winston's group has been quietly buying shares through shell companies. They've aligned with our biggest competitors. They're not just trying to stop the merger. They want to dismantle everything we've built. Victoria burst in, her pregnancy now visible beneath her Alexander McQueen suit. It's worse than we thought. They're attacking on all fronts. The Conservative Families Council just released a documentary about the degradation of traditional values at Whitmore Tech. They've got footage of Marcus's past, twisted stories about the rehabilitation program, even private photos of the children. Haley's heart stopped. What photos? Everything. Victoria's voice cracked. Sophie's community center visits, Michael's concerts in the dangerous parts of town, Emma's social media posts about social justice. They're painting us as a family in moral decline, corrupting the next generation of society. The elevator chimed, and Caroline rushed in, looking shaken. The old families are withdrawing their support en masse. The Daughters of California Heritage just revoked my lifetime membership. They're calling for a complete return to traditional leadership and values. Let them, Andrew started, but was interrupted by James Chen bursting through the door. The stock is in free fall, he announced grimly. Winston's group is spreading rumors about financial mismanagement, claiming the community programs are bleeding money. Major institutional investors are getting nervous. Haley's phone lit up with a text from Marcus. Media camping outside the restaurant. Someone leaked employee records. My past is all over the news. Kids in the program are scared. What should I tell them? Before she could respond, Alexander Wang's face appeared on the conference room screen, his expression grave. We have a situation in Singapore. Our Conservative board members are pressuring us to withdraw from the merger. They're saying association with Whitmore Tech has become too risky. The room spun with the speed of their carefully built world unraveling. Everything they'd worked for, the programs, the changes, the new vision of what business and society could be, was under attack. They were waiting for this moment, Victoria realized, sinking into a chair. The perfect storm. Hit us from all sides when we're most vulnerable. Andrew's phone buzzed again. Winston wants to meet. Now. He says he has a reasonable proposal to maintain the Whitmore legacy. It's a trap, James warned. Of course it is, Andrew agreed. But we don't have a choice. The shareholders' meeting is in 2 hours. The next hour was a blur of activity. As Andrew and James prepared for the confrontation with Winston, Haley and Victoria raced to manage the growing crisis. Caroline worked her remaining society connections, trying to stem the tide of deserting allies. The children were rushed home from school as paparazzi began gathering outside their usual haunts. Bernard Winston was waiting in the main boardroom, surrounded by a team of lawyers and old guard board members. His smile was that of a predator who knew his prey was cornered. Andrew, he greeted smoothly, I believe you know Harrison Palmer. The image consultant who had once tried to remake Haley stood by Winston's side looking apologetic but determined. I tried to help you understand, he said. Traditional values exist for a reason. Structure, stability, order. You mean control, Haley cut in, entering the room despite Andrew's attempt to protect her from this confrontation. The ability to decide who belongs and who doesn't. Precisely, Winston nodded, unashamed. And you, my dear, never belonged. None of this belonged. The street criminals in executive dining rooms, the society children playing in slums, the mixing of classes and cultures. It's unnatural. What's your proposal? Andrew demanded. Winston's smile widened. Simple. You step down as CEO. We install traditional leadership. The Wang merger is cancelled. The community programs are shut down. Your family maintains its wealth and status, but returns to appropriate social boundaries. And if we refuse, then we reveal everything, Winston threatened. Every detail of Marcus's criminal record, every penny spent on your wife's pet projects, every questionable decision that prioritized social impact over shareholder value. Your children's future in society will be complicated. The threat hung in the air like poison, but before anyone could respond, the boardroom doors burst open. Emma, Michael and Sophie walked in, followed by Marcus and a group of program participants, former inmates in chef's whites, standing tall despite the cameras flashing through the windows. "We heard everything." Emma's voice shook, but held firm. "And we have something to say." "This is a private meeting," Winston began, but Caroline's voice cut through. "No," she declared, entering behind the group. "This is a family matter, and they are family." Michael stepped forward, guitar in hand. "You talk about legacy and tradition. Well, here's a tradition worth keeping." He began to play, not classical music or refined jazz, but a soulful blend of styles that spoke of both struggle and hope. One by one, Marcus's students shared their stories. Lives changed, families rebuilt, communities transformed. Real impact, measured not in stock prices but in human dignity. Emma pulled up social media on the boardroom's main screen. Not her own accounts, but hundreds of posts from community members, employees, partners, and even competing companies, all rallying behind Whitmore Tech's vision of inclusive progress. Sophie, small but mighty, walked right up to Winston. "My teacher says true leadership is helping others grow, not keeping them small." The tension in the room was electric. Winston's facade cracked slightly. "Touching, but sentiment doesn't run a business. The shareholders are right here," came Mei Wang's voice as she entered with her father, "and we have something to show you." Alexander Wang nodded to James, who pulled up new financial projections. "The community programs? They've reduced training costs by 60% company-wide. Employee retention is up 85%. Brand loyalty has translated to a 40% increase in customer lifetime value. But the stock price," Winston protested, "is manipulated," Victoria finished, waddling forward with a stack of documents. "We've traced the shell companies, the rumors, the coordinated attacks, all orchestrated to create artificial panic. The SEC will be very interested in these findings." Winston's face darkened. "You wouldn't dare." "The scandal would be fascinating," Harrison Palmer interrupted, stepping away from Winston's side. "A story of old power trying to crush new progress, of fear fighting hope. I wonder how that would play in today's social climate." Winston looked around the room, seeing his support crumbling, but he had one last card to play. "The old families will never accept this change," he threatened. "You'll be outcasts. Your children will be exactly who they are meant to be," Haley declared. "Not who fear and tradition demand they become." The shareholders' meeting that followed was unlike any in corporate history. Instead of dry financial presentations, they showed real impact. Marcus's students cooked for the assembled investors. Michael's music students performed. Community partners testified to the tangible changes in their neighborhoods. The vote wasn't even close. Winston's group was ousted. The Wang merger was approved. The new vision of corporate responsibility was endorsed with overwhelming support. But the real victory came later that night, in Marcus's kitchen. The whole family, biological and chosen, gathered to cook together. Victoria, her designer dress protected by a well-worn apron, taught Sophie her secret sauce recipe. Caroline and Michael played duets on his guitar, her classical training blending with his modern style. Emma documented it all, not for social media buzz, but for family history. Harrison Palmer appeared briefly, carrying a gift. "A peace offering," he said, handing Haley a box. Inside was her old waitress uniform from the restaurant. "Keep it," he advised, "not as a reminder of where you came from, but as proof of how far we all can go when we dare to change." The storm outside had cleared, leaving the city washed clean. From the kitchen window, they could see the lights of San Francisco sparkling, old money mansions and new tech towers, immigrant neighborhoods and corporate headquarters, all part of the same beautiful tapestry. Andrew pulled Haley close, watching their unlikely family celebrate. "Was it worth it?" he whispered. "All the fights, the risk, the change?" Haley looked at Marcus teaching Victoria knife skills, at Michael and Emma helping their younger cousins from the Wang family with homework, at Sophie falling asleep in Caroline's lap as the older woman hummed a Chinese lullaby learned from Grace Wang. "Look around," she smiled. "This is what legacy really looks like. Not preserved in tradition's amber, but alive, growing, becoming something new and beautiful every day." The next morning, as dawn broke over the bay, the Whitmore Wang Memorial Foundation announced its first major initiative, a global program combining traditional wisdom with modern innovation, old values with new vision, reaching across all the artificial boundaries that had once seemed so important. And in Marcus's kitchen, a new generation of leaders began their day's training, wearing chef's whites embroidered with a simple motto: growth requires courage. The old power hadn't been destroyed, it had been transformed. The price of change had been high, but the reward was beyond measure. A future where belonging wasn't determined by birth or bank accounts, but by the courage to be authentically oneself while helping others do the same. As Haley drove to work that morning, she passed the Conservative Families Council building. Its imposing facade, once so intimidating, now seemed like a relic of a passing age. The future belonged to those brave enough to imagine it differently. She smiled, remembering Sophie's words to Winston. True leadership is helping others grow, not keeping them small. In the end, that had been their real victory. Not defeating the old guard, but showing them a better way forward. The price of change had been high, but the cost of remaining unchanged would have been infinitely higher. Sometimes, the greatest act of love for a legacy is letting it evolve into something new, something that could hold all the complexity and beauty of a world ready to grow beyond its old boundaries. And in that transformation, they had all found something precious, the courage to be fully, unapologetically themselves, while creating space for others to do the same. The real legacy wasn't in preserving the past, but in nurturing the seeds of a more inclusive, authentic future. That was worth any price. In the weeks that followed, the true magnitude of their victory and its ongoing challenges became clear. The media storm hadn't subsided. Instead, it had transformed into something more complex. Every major business publication wanted to analyze the Whitmore Revolution, as they called it. Social commentators debated the implications for corporate America. The story had struck a chord that resonated far beyond San Francisco. One morning, as Haley prepared for another round of interviews, she found Victoria in the mansion's library, surrounded by old family photographs. "Look at this," Victoria held up a faded image. "Father's first board meeting. All men, all white, all wearing the same expression of careful disdain." She picked up another photo. "And here's last week's leadership meeting." The contrast was stark. The new photo showed a diverse group. Marcus in his chef's whites discussing community engagement, Mei Wang presenting innovation strategies, former program participants now serving as department heads. Children, including Michael, Emma, and Sophie, sat in on the meeting, their presence a reminder of who they were really building the future for. "I found something else," Victoria said softly, pulling out an old journal. "Father's private thoughts about the company. Listen to this. Sometimes I wonder if we've built not a legacy but a prison of expectations. My children will inherit wealth, but at what cost to their souls?" The discovery sparked a new initiative. That afternoon, in a packed auditorium at Stanford Business School, Andrew and Haley launched the Whitmore Center for Conscious Capitalism. But instead of a traditional academic presentation, they created something different. The stage was set up like Marcus's kitchen. As Andrew discussed corporate transformation, Marcus and his team prepared meals for the audience. While Haley explained their community integration model, Michael and his music students provided a soundtrack that blended classical pieces with street rhythms. Emma and her social media team documented it all, showing in real time how authentic storytelling could bridge worlds. "Business isn't just about profit and loss statements," Andrew told the assembled future leaders. "It's about the stories we choose to tell, the boundaries we dare to question, the communities we commit to serve." Bernard Winston attended the presentation, sitting quietly in the back. When it was over, he approached Haley, his usual confidence replaced by something more contemplative. "My granddaughter," he said hesitantly. "She's 15, brilliant at math, passionate about social justice, the kind of combination I would have once seen as problematic." He paused. "She wants to intern in your community program this summer. Would that be possible?" It was a small moment, but it represented something profound. The old guard wasn't just accepting change. They were beginning to see its value for their own families. The transformation continued to ripple outward. Other major corporations began launching their own community integration programs. Old money families started reassessing their approaches to philanthropy and social engagement. Even Mrs. Winchester's Youth Refinement Program had a waiting list of students from all backgrounds, eager to learn how to navigate between worlds while maintaining their authenticity. But perhaps the most significant changes were the quiet ones, the personal victories that wouldn't make headlines but meant everything to those involved. One evening, as the extended family gathered for their now traditional cooking lesson, Sophie made an announcement that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "For my school project about heroes," she declared, "I wrote about all of us. Not because we're rich or important, but because we were scared and did the right thing anyway. Because we learned that being a family means helping other people become family too." Marcus, teaching a group of new program participants, overheard and had to turn away to hide his emotion. Victoria, now heavily pregnant, squeezed his shoulder in understanding. "You know," she said to the group, "I used to think power meant keeping others out. Now I realize true power is finding ways to let everyone in." Caroline, who had been quietly documenting the family's journey in a leather-bound journal, looked up from her writing. "We're not just changing a company or a family," she observed. "We're changing the story of what success can look like." The journal itself was becoming something remarkable. Caroline had asked everyone, family members, program participants, community partners, even former opponents, to contribute their perspectives. The result was a rich tapestry of voices, all grappling with the challenges and rewards of authentic transformation. Later that night, after the cooking lesson had evolved into an impromptu celebration, Haley found Andrew in his office, looking out over the city. The lights of San Francisco sparkled below, each one representing a story, a possibility, a potential for change. "I got a call from the Wang family," he said as she joined him. "They want to expand the program to Asia, not just the business model, the whole philosophy. Traditional families there are struggling with the same questions we faced." "Are you ready for that?" Haley asked. "It's a huge undertaking." Andrew smiled, pulling her close. "A year ago, I wouldn't have been. But now?" He gestured to the photos on his desk. Michael teaching guitar to Winston's granddaughter, Emma helping Marcus's students tell their stories, Sophie mediating a playdate between old money and new vision. "Now I understand that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating spaces where people can discover their own." The next morning brought a new test of their resolve. A traditional business magazine published a scathing critique of their model, arguing that their emphasis on social impact would ultimately hurt shareholder value. The old fears threatened to resurface, but something had changed. Instead of responding defensively, they invited the magazine's editorial board to spend a day in their world, not just in the corporate offices, but in Marcus's kitchen, in the community centers, in the spaces where real transformation was happening. The resulting article, titled "The Economics of Authenticity," became required reading in business schools across the country. It challenged not just traditional corporate metrics, but the very way success was measured and valued. As Haley read the article, sitting in her office that seamlessly blended corporate efficiency with community warmth, she reflected on the true price of change. It wasn't just about weathering criticism or fighting opposition. It was about maintaining the courage to remain authentic, even when it would be easier to retreat behind old walls. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Harrison Palmer, the former image consultant who had once tried to remake her into someone else. "I've been thinking," he said, taking a seat, "all those lessons about fitting in, about meeting expectations. What if we created a new kind of consulting, one that helps people and organizations find their authentic voice instead of trying to match some arbitrary standard?" The idea sparked a new initiative, the Authenticity Project, a partnership between the Whitmore Foundation and traditional etiquette schools. Its mission was to help individuals and organizations navigate change while maintaining their core values, not by conforming to old standards, but by creating new ones that could hold all the complexity of modern life. The project's first clients, the Conservative Families Council themselves, now realizing that their own survival depended on their ability to evolve while preserving what truly mattered. As the sun set on another transformative day, the extended Whitmore Wang family gathered in Marcus's kitchen. The smell of multiple cuisines filled the air as traditional recipes merged with modern interpretations. Classical music mixed with hip-hop as Michael's students performed. Emma documented it all, not for show, but for history. Victoria, due any day now, watched the scene with tears in her eyes. "This," she said to Haley, "this is what I want my child to inherit. Not just wealth or status, but the courage to be real, to help others be real, to create spaces where everyone can grow." The price of change had indeed been high. They had risked everything, wealth, status, tradition, on the belief that authenticity and inclusion were worth more than artificial perfection. But as Haley looked around at their beautifully messy, perfectly imperfect family, she knew that some prices were worth paying, not just for themselves, but for all the generations to come. The real legacy wasn't in preserving old boundaries, but in having the courage to imagine and create new ways of belonging, leading, and loving. And that was a prize beyond measure. 5 years had passed since the dramatic shareholders' meeting that changed everything. The San Francisco Chronicle's headline captured it perfectly. Whitmore Wang Legacy, the billion-dollar gamble that transformed corporate America. The autumn air was crisp as limousines and luxury cars pulled up to the newly renovated Legion of Honor. Inside, the annual Whitmore Foundation Gala was unlike anything San Francisco society had ever seen. Tech billionaires mingled with former inmates turned entrepreneurs. Old money socialites engaged in animated discussions with community activists. Children from every background showcased their achievements in art, music, and social innovation. Victoria, elegant in Alexander McQueen despite her exhaustion from running the now famous culinary rehabilitation program, watched her 4-year-old daughter Luna practice her presentation with Marcus. The little girl had insisted on demonstrating her knife skills with a plastic knife and explaining how cooking could make the world more better. "Remember when I thought teaching ex-cons to cook was beneath us?" Victoria mused to Haley, who stood beside her in a sleek Tom Ford pantsuit. "Now my daughter's learning life lessons from a former bank robber, and I couldn't be prouder." But beneath the surface of success, tensions were building that would test their transformation in unexpected ways. The first tremor came when Andrew received an urgent call from Singapore. "The Wang family patriarch is dying," he told Haley privately. "Alexander wants to see all of us, immediately." The family's private jet departed within hours. As they crossed the Pacific, Caroline shared surprising news of her own. "I'm selling my shares in Whitmore Tech," she announced calmly. "All of them." The shock rippled through the cabin. "Mother, why?" Andrew demanded. "Because it's time for the next phase," she smiled mysteriously. "William Chang and I have been working on something. The old mansion. We're turning it into the Whitmore Chang Academy for Transformative Leadership, a place where privilege meets purpose." But the real surprises awaited them in Singapore. Alexander Wang, frailer than they remembered but his eyes still sharp, had gathered both families for what he called the final merger. "Our experiment in conscious capitalism has succeeded beyond our dreams," he began. "But success brings its own dangers. We risk becoming exactly what we sought to change, another dynasty, another form of exclusion." He nodded to his daughter May, who activated a holographic display showing a radical restructuring plan. The Whitmore Wang Corporation would be transformed into a network of community-owned enterprises, with profits and power distributed among employees, community partners, and social impact initiatives. "We're not just changing how business works," Alexander continued. "We're changing who owns it, who benefits from it, who gets to dream because of it." The plan was brilliant, but terrifying. It would mean surrendering much of their personal wealth and power. The families would retain leadership roles, but as stewards rather than owners. Before anyone could respond, Bernard Winston's granddaughter Julia, now a key player in their youth leadership program, burst into the room. "We have a problem," she announced. "A big one." The holographic display switched to breaking news. A global consortium of traditional business leaders had launched a coordinated attack on their model. Stock prices were plummeting. Conservative media was running exposés on the dangerous social experiment of community integration. "They're saying we're destroying the foundation of capitalism," Julia reported, "that our success is a threat to the natural order." But as the families absorbed this crisis, something unexpected happened. Sophie, now 12 and startlingly wise, started laughing. "Don't you see?" she asked. "They're right. We are destroying their version of capitalism. That's the whole point." The room fell silent as she continued. "Grandpa Wang isn't dying, at least not the way we thought. He's making sure his death catalyzes something bigger than all of us." Alexander's eyes twinkled as he nodded to his honorary granddaughter. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said softly. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind of activity. As global markets reacted to the crisis, the families executed Alexander's plan with precision. But there was a twist even he hadn't anticipated. Marcus's rehabilitation program graduates, now successful business owners themselves, launched a grassroots campaign to support the restructuring. Emma's social media network exploded with stories of lives transformed. Michael's music students organized flash mob performances in financial districts worldwide. Then came the masterstroke. Caroline and William Chang revealed that the Whitmore Chang Academy wasn't just a school, it was the headquarters of a global movement. They had spent years quietly building a network of progressive business leaders, social innovators, and next-generation philanthropists. The old guard thought they were fighting a company, Caroline announced at a press conference that shook the business world. They didn't realize they were fighting the future itself, but victory came at a price. The restructuring meant the Whitmore and Wang families would lose much of their personal fortune. The mansions, the jets, the trappings of extreme wealth would be transformed into community assets. As they gathered one last time in the Singapore penthouse, Victoria cradled Luna while watching the sunset over the city. "Are we crazy?" she asked softly. "Giving up everything we fought so hard to protect?" "We're not giving it up," Haley corrected. "We're giving it forward." The transformation wasn't easy. The media chronicled every painful step. Some called it the end of an era. Others hailed it as the beginning of a revolution. The truth was somewhere in between. 1 year later, the results began to show. The distributed ownership model had created thousands of new entrepreneurs. The community integration programs had reduced recidivism rates dramatically. The Whitmore Chang Academy was producing a new generation of leaders who measured success by impact rather than wealth. But perhaps the most profound changes were the personal ones. Victoria found her true calling teaching business skills to former inmates, her corporate expertise finally serving a purpose that filled her soul. Marcus expanded his program internationally, proving that second chances knew no borders. Michael's music therapy program became a core part of their rehabilitation work, healing trauma through art. Emma leveraged her social media expertise to create a platform for untold stories of transformation. Sophie continued to surprise everyone with her ability to bridge worlds, becoming the youngest ever speaker at Davos. Caroline and William Chang's partnership blossomed into a late-life romance that scandalized traditional society and delighted their grandchildren. And Haley? She found herself exactly where she never expected to be, teaching a class at Stanford Business School alongside Bernard Winston himself. Their former antagonism transformed into a powerful partnership for change. The final twist came on the 5th anniversary of Alexander Wang's death announcement. As the families gathered in Singapore again, they were stunned to find him in robust health, practicing Tai Chi in the rooftop garden. "You faked your illness?" Andrew asked, torn between admiration and shock. "I needed a catalyst," Alexander smiled. "Sometimes the only way to truly change things is to make people face what they fear most, the end of everything they know." "But why the deception?" Victoria pressed. "Because truth wrapped in drama travels faster than facts alone." He winked at Sophie, who grinned back. "Your children taught me that." As they celebrated that night, not in a luxury hotel but in a community center they'd helped build, Haley looked around at their transformed family. They had less money now, but somehow felt richer. Less power in traditional terms, but more ability to affect real change. Luna, playing with children from the local neighborhood, didn't care about stock prices or social status. She was growing up in a world where barriers were meant to be bridged, not maintained. "Was it worth it?" Andrew asked, echoing a question from years ago. "Giving up the empire to build something uncertain?" Haley watched as Marcus taught cooking to a mixed group of society kids and former street children. Victoria was showing a former rival's daughter how to perfect her sauce technique. Michael's music filled the air as Emma documented it all, not for show but for history. "We didn't give up an empire," Haley realized. "We helped build a better one that grows stronger by giving power away." The real surprise, the final twist in their tale, wasn't that they had succeeded in changing the system. It was that the system had changed them in exactly the ways they needed to be changed. They had set out to transform the world of wealth and power, only to discover that true wealth lay in connections, not possessions. Real power came from empowering others. And legacy? Legacy wasn't what you left behind, but what you helped others build for themselves. As the evening wound down, Sophie gathered everyone for a toast. "To the price of change," she said, raising her glass, "and to the priceless rewards it brings." Looking out over the Singapore skyline, where old money towers stood alongside new community spaces, Haley understood at last. They hadn't just changed a family, a company, or even an economic system. They had changed the story of what was possible when people dared to imagine a different kind of success, and that was a legacy worth any price. 10 years later, San Francisco. The old restaurant in the Marina district looked different now. The simple facade had been preserved, but the interior had been transformed into a unique blend of casual comfort and thoughtful elegance. Photos of successful graduates lined the walls, alongside headlines chronicling the Whitmore Revolution that had changed corporate America. Haley stood in the kitchen doorway, watching the scene before her with quiet satisfaction. Marcus, his hair now streaked with grey, was teaching a masterclass to a diverse group of students. Among them was Luna, Victoria's teenage daughter, her determination matching her mother's but tempered with a compassion that the old Victoria would have considered weakness. "Still your favorite spot?" Andrew's voice came from behind her. Time had added distinguished silver to his temples, and the lines around his eyes spoke of a decade of both challenges and laughter. "Always," Haley smiled. "This is where everything began, and where it keeps beginning for others." Through the window they could see the city skyline. The Whitmore Tech Tower still stood proud, but it now shared space with community centers, educational facilities, and incubators for social enterprises. The Wang Whitmore Foundation's distributed ownership model had become a case study in business schools worldwide. The sound of guitars drew their attention to the restaurant's new music space, where Michael, now a renowned music therapist, was conducting a session with former inmates and hedge fund managers alike. His original program had expanded into a global network of healing through arts initiatives. Emma, who had transformed her social media expertise into a powerful platform for social change, was documenting the session. Her documentary series about second chances had won multiple awards, but she cared more about the lives changed by the stories she told. "Mom!" Sophie's voice rang out as she burst through the door, her Stanford Business School acceptance letter in hand. At 22, she embodied the bridge between worlds they had fought to build. "They want me to give a guest lecture about the Academy's impact." The Whitmore Chang Academy for Transformative Leadership, Caroline and William's legacy, had become a beacon for a new generation of leaders who saw profit and purpose as inseparable partners. Victoria arrived next, trading her designer suits for chef's whites years ago. Her rehabilitation program had expanded to 30 cities across 3 continents. "The new Singapore campus opens next month," she announced, hugging her daughter Luna. "Alexander wants us all there." Alexander Wang, now truly in his twilight years but still sharp as ever, had lived to see his death catalyst transform into something far beyond his original vision. The crisis he manufactured had sparked a movement that reshaped global capitalism. As the family gathered for their traditional evening meal, a tradition that now included dozens of adopted members from all walks of life, Bernard Winston's granddaughter Julia arrived with news. "The last holdout from the old guard just joined the distributed ownership network," she announced. "The transformation is complete." But the real victory was visible in the smaller moments. In Luna, teaching knife skills to a nervous new student. In Michael's music, students performing with newfound confidence. In Emma's camera, capturing not wealth or status, but genuine human connection. Caroline, her late-life romance with William Chang, having inspired a generation of rule breakers, raised her glass. "To the price we paid," she said softly, "and the riches we found instead." The sun set over San Francisco Bay, casting a golden light through the restaurant windows. The fog rolled in, as it always did, blurring the lines between the city's hills and valleys, between its past and its future. In the kitchen where it all began, where a waitress dared to love a billionaire and a family dared to change, new stories were taking shape. New bridges were being built. New definitions of success were being written. Haley looked around at her beautiful, complicated, expanded family, related by blood, choice, and shared purpose, and understood that their legacy wasn't in the empires they'd transformed or the wealth they'd redistributed. Their true legacy lived in the courage to imagine something different, in the wisdom to know that real change starts with changing yourself, in the understanding that the most valuable inheritance isn't money or power, but the ability to see beyond the boundaries of what seems possible. As the evening wound down, Sophie raised one final toast. "To the next generation," she said, looking at Luna and the other young leaders in the room. "May they build bridges we haven't even dreamed of yet." The future stretched out before them, not as a carefully preserved tradition, but as an ever-evolving story of transformation, connection, and the courage to grow beyond the boundaries of expectation. And in that ongoing story, they had found something far more precious than the wealth they'd surrendered or the power they'd transformed. They had found themselves and each other in the spaces between who they were expected to be and who they dared to become. That was the real legacy. That was the final victory. That was the price of change and its priceless reward. And it was just the beginning. What did you think of this story? Leave a rating from 0 to 10 in the comments below with your answer. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you missed our last story, here's what happened. Amid the glamour of a lavish wedding ceremony, a single act shattered the spell. The groom, without hesitation, slapped the bride. But what he didn't know was that this act would mark the beginning of a twist fate had meticulously planned, one that would change everything in unimaginable ways. Curious to find out what happened in this unmissable tale? Click now on the video appearing on your screen and dive into a story that weaves betrayal, power, and twists as impactful as that slap. See you there.